I'm Mara. I am with Music Portland. And I want to first say thank you to Ron Toms, to all of their amazing staff for having us. This is one of our favorite places. So tip like drunken sailors, okay? That's what we're looking for tonight. Also, thank you for David Stride, who is, as ever, an amazing sound buddy. And
thank you, David.
So we're really excited to be talking about funding. Artists, well, first of all, you live in a town that arts and culture, you must use finger quotes, means that you do it in a way that you can't survive without subsidy. It's a very weird thing that all of our funding sources for creative things have been built around the idea that it has to be nonprofit to be culture or to be legitimate. And I have heard from somebody who was recounting to somebody from somebody else that it has been referred to, they're called legitimate arts. That's classical music, that can often be jazz, that might be music for education, some kinds of world music. Those are considered legitimate arts. Because our music used to be something you could actually maybe almost make a living at. It was by design, these things were created to not include us. But as monetization has changed, now there's very little difference between, a cello player who is in a chamber music gig, doing gigs and maybe making a record once in a while. There's no difference from a heavy metal bassist who's in a band, who's doing gigs, who's making records once in a while. So it's like the systems that were designed to support creativity are out of step with the needs of the creative community. And for the first 2 years, I was really in there trying to work with RAC and say, but maybe there's a way to do it. Last year, they had an estimated $27 million in funding. About half of it goes to grants. About a quarter of it goes to public art. And about 10% of it goes to music education. And those are all laudable things. And frankly, Oregon ranks at the bottom of arts funding, even for those legitimate arts. So we as a community, who outnumber them by far, I really didn't like the idea of going in and cannibalizing what is already limited funding. And also, their funding processes are designed not necessarily intentionally, but to exclude popular artists in the way that they work. So I judged a number of the music grants for RAC's last round before COVID, and they would say, how long will you take to compose the piece? And where will the piece be performed? And how many people will see the piece? And then that's what you're judged on. How do you do a grant with that when you wrote the song in the shower, you workshopped it for a while, you then recorded it, and you're playing it in perpetuity? It's like, it doesn't fit. So that even if they do get upset with me when I say, you disadvantage commercial artists. And they say, no, we don't, they can apply. And I was like, yeah, but they're square pegs. It doesn't work. And rather than fighting to make it fit, we have decided that we're going to go a different way. We're going to create our own fund and support artists in the way that they need to be supported. And that's the ECHO Fund, which I'll be talking about later. Let me see what else. Oh, another thing, RAG, the leaders, the city arts manager has just announced that they've got an RFP out for the update, it's 5 or 6 years out of date, the city cultural plan. This is the only formal plan about culture done in the city of Portland. And it absolutely, on the first line, says this is about nonprofit arts. So the city cultural plan is not going to include anything about what y'all do, which I think is outrageous, and I'm making a pest of myself.
Yes.
Yeah, we appreciate that part. So it's in that context that we decided, rather than trying to cannibalize limited funding or get involved with a group that I think they've had a lot of trouble in some of their recent audits, let's create the grant program that we need, and let's fight for the value that this community brings to Portland and to the Portland business community, and find new funding sources that can make sure that we're supporting this community in the way they need it. One other story, the Oregon Cultural Trust announced that they were doing a music grant for Black and brown people. And then I heard from people that applied for it, because I said, everybody, you should be applying for this. And I heard back from people that they were admonished for wasting people's time for applying as MCs or producers. If you don't even understand the culture that you're supposed to be supporting, you can't support it. So all of it means that we need to stand up for ourselves in each of these different things, and these beautiful people are going to be talking about what they've done, successful and unsuccessful, in applying for grants that are out there and exist. And I'm going to pass it on over to, who wants to go first?
Let me give an introduction.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Awesome. So, thank you, Mara.
Thank you, Mara.
So we have a great panel tonight. We're going to probably start it off. Mara, I'm going to start off by asking you a question, but I want to introduce the panelists first. So next to me we have Sarah Clark, and Sarah is a PDX native. She is the mother of Donovan. How old is your son?
He is going into 6th grade next year. He just turned 11 and just started playing the saxophone.
Nice.
It's really exciting.
And you are the lead for Dirty Revival, and you have a new project.
Yeah, I worked with Dirty Revival for a handful of years. I also front the Portland band Outer Orbit and also the Oakland band Combrio.
Awesome. So you're not busy.
It's just super a lot of free time.
So you've applied for and received grants, and you've also not gotten grants that you've applied for, and so you're going to share your experience tonight. And then to your right, and to your left, I guess, anyway, it'll be Lindsay Clark.
No relation.
They're not related, but they're both lady musicians. So Lindsay, you are a multi-instrumentalist and songwriter, and you're releasing a new album like tomorrow.
In a few weeks.
In a few weeks. And the name of the album is Carpe Noctem. Oh, it's June 24th. And you have a lot of experience with grants, and you even have info that you're going to write into a guide at some point, because you've really figured out some ins and outs and tips and tricks. So,
I want to read that.
and Mara needs
I'll
no
work on that.
introduction. So.
Yeah, so, and then there's me.
And so, Mara, why don't we start with you, and let me ask you, what kinds of grant funding has been available to popular musicians and artists up to this point?
Well, as I started off in my blurb, not many. But let me ask, in this group, who's applied for an arts and culture grant from any organization? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many of you have secured the grant? There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. Okay, that's actually not too bad, actually. You guys, that's pretty good. Let's figure out what these guys have to tell us.
All right.
So, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? Are we asking about if we've...
Well, and I was asking Mara about what kinds of grant funding has been available, and could you tell us about the types of grants that you've applied for and some of the challenges maybe that you've encountered? And before you start, I'll tell you, about a week ago, I interviewed Mike Crenshaw, and he was sharing his own experience and wanted to be here tonight, but he's headed to Tanzania tomorrow, I think. And so he was sharing that one of the things that he noticed when the killing of George Floyd happened was that institutions had started to realize that there was an inherent privilege embedded into the process of applying for funding. And he felt that maybe there was going to be some opening and understanding about the fact that what he said was it's like you're sitting behind a two-way mirror and you're sharing everything. It's your identity that you're sharing in these grant applications, and yet you can't even see the people that are literally judging you. So with that, tell us your experience, and have you had those kinds of challenges?
Yeah, I'd like to start by saying that I agree that there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that have suddenly realized that maybe their systems are a little inequitable, whether or not that's coming from a place of truly wanting to open the doors to allow people of color to step through them and receive those grants, or whether it's kind of coming from that same lane that we are all so familiar with of like corporate, like, oh no, we have to show everyone that we care. I'm not totally sure a lot of the time where that's coming from, and the more that we notice that these grants are not actually taking into account the culture of the people that are applying for them, the more I tend to think that they are a performative act. And with that being said, I always feel very conflicted in how to accurately, like apply for something when you know that you're already playing a game that's stacked against you, that you kind of already have to mold and bend and shape your person and who you are in order to even get your foot in the door, let alone have any success within that. I think that it is important, though, to learn how to navigate those spaces. And I'm sorry, what was the actual question? Because now I'm going off on a tangent in my mind. I think it's a little.
So tell us about maybe some examples of application processes that you've experienced that were challenging, and then we'll move into what wasn't.
Yeah, I think that Mara actually hit it right in the head. A lot of the rap grants that I found myself kind of balking at, just like, blinking at with these questions about like, who are you going to be, how many people will you be performing for, who is going to be recording this, like this whole idea about music that is really very like corporatized. It's like I don't actually, when I write a song, I'm not thinking about any of that. And when I go to perform this song, that's actually the last thing I'm thinking about. It's like it's a reflection of who I am. So, and ideally, I think with any musician, like, you put yourself out there, you want the people in the audience to see you and hear you. You're kind of, I think that we can all say that we share that thing of like wanting to be heard and felt and seen. And how to quantify that into like, I don't know, 5,000 letters on like a little blurb on the internet is really, really challenging. And so I did find that I found myself kind of trying to put in boxes things that are difficult to package, right? So in talking about like who my music was for, and then also maybe trying to challenge a little bit what, like even the idea that they were presenting me is like, like who is this going to be performed for? Well, ideally everybody thinks, like who are you, like who are you going to make this music with? Anybody that wants to share a stage, frankly, and kind of trying to answer and at the same time redirect the question to show the inequities within the language, which exist and are really, really challenging to deal with. And so, I found that when I was the most successful was when I kind of kept my temper about the whole thing. And there's been times when that's been really challenging, and especially, in the last year or so, I found that to be even more challenging. And those are the times where I haven't been as successful with, with that work. So.
Oh, thank you. And why don't we take it down to Lindsay, and could you talk about challenges to applying for grants that you've experienced before we circle back to some of the strategies to do it better?
Yes, I definitely, going off what Sarah was saying, I think there are a lot of challenges in the way that things are formatted, like Mira has also mentioned, and the way that questions are asked, especially to people who are maybe more popular contemporary musicians. And it definitely forces you, I think, to think about what you're doing in a different way, which maybe is positive and negative. I'm not exactly sure how that goes, but I think it's definitely can be challenging to put yourself in the mindset of the type of questions that they're asking, which is like a question like, what sort of like impact is this going to have on the world, which is like a really difficult question to answer. It's always a question in grant applications.
If you could tell me that before I make the art, then maybe it would change the art that I make.
And I guess maybe that, you're right. The question is more maybe intended to be like, what is your intention of the impact or something like that, but you know, as we all know, like the state of the music industry and everything, it can be really hard to have any idea what the impact of your music might be. At the same time, it's like, you know, I think we can all say that it's valuable, even if like one person hears it and, you know, they're affected by it or something, but that's hard to communicate in a grant application, the value of that. Or the value just of like, you know, what you're doing for its own sake or for the personal meaning in what you're creating. I think another challenge is just in the writing of it and being articulate, and which isn't to say that we all can't be articulate, but I think that it's maybe unintentionally weighted toward people that can write effectively and communicate their ideas in a way that's like presentable or palatable, which I think probably brings up other equity issues. And yeah, I think some of that like maybe can, you know, as you like do more and more applications, maybe you kind of get better at that, but it definitely like is a challenge inherent in the process being like a writing process to some degree. At the same time, I think that some organizations are like trying to change that. I don't know if you know more about that. But
It feels like a coded language. Like I have to apply for grants for Music Portland, and I'm reading it, and I read it, and I say it means this, and then I read it again, it's like, well, maybe they mean that. And then I read it again, and I think, wait a minute, maybe with that other thing, maybe they mean that. You spend so much time second guessing yourself on every single answer because it feels like it's a code that you don't understand. And I know that's going to be even more the case as we bring stuff out to artists that haven't done it before.
Yeah, and it's in my own experience, the first one is the hardest, as is true with a lot of stuff, you know, but once you kind of get some help and begin to develop the content, you can save it. And Sarah, you were talking earlier before the meeting about how it's important to save the good work that you've done because it gets easier as you go along.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, and I did want to kind of piggyback on a little bit about what both of you were saying. Something that's also really challenging is that you don't know who you're talking to. There is no, it's like you're just kind of hoping for the best, and depending on like the, you know, your personal like demographic, you know, you might be more successful just assuming one thing. But like there are certain people that will read something that, you know, maybe I write that will like totally right off the bat identify with it and understand where I'm coming from, whereas like there's a whole group of people that will not. And so like knowing, and frankly I think that especially as a woman of color and for people of color, assuming that you're usually talking to like a group of white individuals, that's something that can be a little intimidating, even whether or not you can like put it together, you know, the way that's going to be absorbed the most. It's just an intimidating process to know that you're not speaking to your community, and that it's a really high probability that you're not speaking to your community, which is really great. RAC has been trying to diversify their that process more, to have more people that are going through grant applications that are coming from different backgrounds, so there can be more input from that space. But just inherently, the nonprofit world is it skews one way, and that's the way that it skews, which is why what you said to start with about having these legitimate arts, which is like probably the most offensive term I've ever heard, but like legitimate arts, that's something that is decided by one group of people and monitored by one group of people. And being as such, it doesn't open the door to everybody else. And that's something that is definitely a hurdle.
So can we talk about some of the strategies that you developed after encountering those challenges? Lindsay, do you have some strategies you'd like to share?
Strategies. Yeah. I think, well, my personal strategy maybe has just been to like keep doing them, which I don't know how much of a strategy that is.
That's right.
And, you know, this is maybe a little more mindset-wise, but just like having an attitude of detachment is helpful to me, and just sort of like, okay, I'm learning, I'm going through the process. Every time I do this, I'm like maybe getting a little bit better at it, or if I'm not, then I'm also sort of like solidifying what am I doing and what is my project, and why is it meaningful. And then aside from that, I think just on like a more practical level, keeping like, I don't know, a calendar of all the deadlines, so that, because I found like early in the process I would just like miss all the deadlines because I would just forget. So that's like just on the practical side. And then I think like, yeah, also just thinking like really like being in touch with myself about like what is the value of what I'm doing, and how can I communicate that, and how can I really like actually believe that while I'm trying to write this application. And, you know, trying to think about like what is, you know, we all like, you know, bring something amazing and unique, and like what is that thing, and how do I learn how to communicate about that for myself. Yeah, and then I think just like knowing what's out there, and knowing like what organizations exist, and what kinds of grants they're doing, like how often, and yeah, I don't know, all that stuff I think is helpful to just like have that like base available.
Did you have someone proof or help you edit, or just be there as a support? Either one of you can answer this, but did you have some help on the outside to just encourage you and tell you, wow, that resonates, or this doesn't feel like it works? Did you have that?
I've never done that, but that's kind of similar. Like I don't do that with my art either. I don't yet like tend to bounce it off people and ask first if it is something that resonates. But I can see why that matters. I also, you know, there's like grant writers out there that take a percentage of, they can do that. Like they'll take a percentage of the grant that they write for you. There's something, I think that's maybe more impactful when it comes to like larger entities that are trying to, you know, bring in large amounts of money. It doesn't really make sense on a smaller scale. But there, you know, yeah, it's really hard to put yourself on a piece of paper anyways, and I think that's kind of why we make art in general. It's like, you know, if we could just like write down who we were real fast and have everyone understand it, then maybe we would do that instead. But, you know, we don't. So like, how do you put yourself into these small little boxes, or these like little questions that you don't really know what they mean when they ask them, you know, like
It can be a bit of a like, if you think about doing it not in the terms of a grant, but if you think about, if you had to, in 200 words, communicate something about yourself, could you do it? Could you do it if you knew who the audience was? Could you do it if you didn't? You know, can you, and then keeping track when you, a lot of these grants have the same questions, or very similar questions. So that if you get something, you really nail it, and you feel like, okay, that's saying what I want to say, make sure you save it and cut and paste.
That was definitely something I was gonna say that helped me a lot, was keeping everything as I applied for things, regardless of whether I thought it was good or not, because you always have the opportunity the next time to hone in on that statement and make it a little more clear. But just making sure that you're, because I mean, the first time is probably not going to be your best attempt at putting yourself out there in the world. But you can always work on that, and knowing where you started last time is a good thing to do. Another thing that really helped me also is kind of more like personal work, but sometimes it's like hard, and I think it's hard for artists. I think it's hard for all people to really ask for what they need and like know their worth and like and then say that to anyone ever. I think that's like a huge challenge, and so really, not undercutting yourself. I can't say that enough. Like, don't ask for the minimum when you're applying for a grant. Like, do the legwork. Figure out like if it's good. If you want to record an album, don't be like, oh, I know my buddy will play bass on this record for X amount of money. Be like, no, like, this is how much a studio musician costs, that times 7 or whatever. Like, this is how much the studio I want to work in costs. And just like put that all out there, because I think Missy said it really well when we were speaking earlier, was that like they're not going to offer you more money just because. Like, you have to ask for the top, and you need to lay out exactly what that is that you're going to spend it on. And they might give you less, but at least like, hey, like, and if you have that in your mind where you're like, I know someone that'll mix this record for cheap or whatever, that's cool, but you don't need to tell anybody. Like, don't tell anybody. And then as you're doing that, also advocate for fair pay with the people that you work with. That's something that we have to do for each other constantly. Like, it's not just, I can't think of any entity that generally is going to offer you what you're worth. You have to tell them what that is. And by doing so, also advocate for the people that you work with.
Can we get a clap for that?
It's important. Thank you.
So, talk about, you just sort of brought it up. Talk about, like, when they ask for financials, they ask for budgets, they ask for numbers. How do you, for the sort of empirical stuff, do you have any tips or tricks about how you organize the information that you share for a grant beyond the sort of, the emotional part, the definitional part? What about the other part that's just kind of making sure you fill in all the boxes? Are there any tips or tricks in those parts?
I think just how you definitely have to have a really clear idea of what you're doing and plan, which is, sometimes we don't have that initially when we're starting a project or a record or whatever it is. I think in my earlier grant applications, it was like definitely like everything was much more vague. So I don't know, I think just having specific dates of like when you're recording, where you're recording, who you're recording with, if this is a recording project, just as an example. But yeah, and then as Sarah was just saying, laying out all the financials, knowing exactly what you're in, like it may change and that there's room for that to change, even if you do get the grant. But, to your best ability, knowing how much you're going to pay each person, how much the mixing is, like, and have that all laid out, and have a way to like confirm that down the line, at least as accurately as you can. And I definitely echo what Sarah said as well about just, I think that being musicians, we sometimes have like the mindset of like, there isn't enough out there to like fund what we want, or like we just have to be poor, or like whatever. And I think I don't know, just like there's something really valuable, I think, in just like asking for the amount that you need and being really honest about that, and not saying like, oh, I'm only going to ask for 3,000 even though I know I need 6,000. Depending on what the grant is, sometimes there's varying amounts that you can ask for, but yeah.
There's a there's a tip I would give, and that is to get yourself out of the system to do your writing, especially if it's your first time. And that means maybe you prefer to write on a notebook, or you prefer to write in your own favored word processing program or whatever, but don't get caught up in the weeds of what they want in their system, which is a technological issue. And it might be that, oh, they want you to submit an Excel spreadsheet and you don't know how to even access Excel. I mean, that's probably antiquated language coming from an old lady. But I know when I was beginning to write grants back in the old days, one of the things that helped me was to get out of their system so I could think. And when I could think, I could get it all down, and then someone else could help me to get that into the format that they wanted to see it in. But often you'll look at something and say, oh my God, there's no way that I can learn how to do that just to say what I want to say. Well, say what you want to say and worry about how to get it in there afterwards.
Yeah, that's really good. A lot of the COVID relief grants asked for people to list how many gigs or like how much money they were bringing in before the pandemic hit, and then like prove how many gigs you lost. And I was like, I don't even know how to do that. And I got really kind of stressed out, like trying to figure out how to translate what was a very busy gig calendar. And like I kind of let myself get bogged down with just that part of it, you know? But then I realized, like, if I do that one time, then it's done. If I save it, it's done. And then I can edit that or do whatever I need to do in order to get it into another like application. There's a lot of that stuff, like saving it is so important, and also like working outside of their space. I have to agree, that's like really, it can feel very suppressive or oppressive.
So Mara, would you like to describe Music Portland's big announcement?
Sure. Got notes and everything. So we got a grant from the city of Portland, and then we had Portland Music Month, which we're calling a pilot program for last year because Omicron dashed our hopes. But it's a setup so that annually Portland Music Month is that month-long citywide festival where every ticket purchased at any one of last year's 16 venues is $1 into the musician fund. And we should have earned about $38,000 for the musician fund last year, given the shows we had. We earned about 10. So added to the city fund, we've got about $50,000 to distribute. And we're calling it the Echo Fund because the word grant scares people. So it is a fund that will award for project grants. So this is our first time through this. I know I've had people saying, well, why aren't you doing this? What we want to do is start off with specific project grants that it can be anything in production. It can be session work, it can be tracking, it can be mixing, it can be mastering, whatever you need at the production. Promotion, it could be, hiring a publicist, it could be merch, it could be whatever you need in promotion, but not paying for places on playlists. Distribution, it's everything from replication of media to distribution platforms and digital things online, and then resources. If you want to buy gear, if you need to upgrade your system, all of those kinds of things are applicable in the Echo Fund. And what we're really trying to do is to create a set of questions that are going to be keyed to what you all do, instead of having you trying to fit yourselves into something else. And it'll still be hard because writing grants is hard. It's not a grant, it's a fund. But writing an application that asks you to tell people why you're wonderful, that's uncomfortable. It just is. Ask your best friend to write about you and see what comes out. Like, if you've got 2 people applying for the grant, work together. Literally, let other people see it. The production grant is specifically for projects, and these projects need to be completed. The part that we're funding, so if we're just funding your studio work, that part needs to be completed by June of 2023. We're going to be opening the applications later this month, and it is not the only fund. There's also a thing called the Holler Fund that is an individual who just loves music who created a fund. I think it's $75,000 per year for 2 years. And they're splitting it into multiple grants. So the next opening for the Holler Fund, that was open for maybe 3 days before they closed it. When we put out notices that there is a fund available or a grant applicable, you guys need to be on it if this is something you care about. We also, for the Echo Fund, we're going to be doing a series of coaching sessions because there's no reason you guys need to know how to do this out of the gate. And I think that we can all help each other with sessions that will be recorded so you can go back and see what people said walking through our application and make sure that your questions are answered. If you have more questions, we'll do another recorded Q&A so that you can see what other people are asking, because you're all in the same boat. Everybody's going to need to be learning this stuff. But this is part of being professional musicians. And in this world, the way that music makes or doesn't make money, it becomes really important to know how to do it and to do it well. There are also other things that we're hoping are coming to town. We're working closely with the Black Fret people out of Austin. That's a kind of private philanthropy club. They've given away something like $3 million to artists. Then they help them with the professional development and ongoing. It's a great program, and they're looking at Portland to come and do it here. We're also talking with the Oregon Cultural Trust and OCF about potential donor-directed funds that would be like that. It would be like Black Fret Local. A bunch of local people that invest in the Oregon Community Fund would say popular music, professional popular music is what they want to support. And that would create a program. So we keep on trying to not only do our own, but find other systems that can do it as well. But it's going to be a learning curve. And the worst thing that can happen, and I've done this twice, and I'm bitter as hell, is that when you spend a bunch of time and you write a grant application, and then you find out something that wasn't written anywhere that makes you ineligible. And that is the kind of thing that I think we can hopefully help with, that and schedule promotion. To be able, when we promote in our member newsletter, these are grants. That's because I've spoken to the grant provider, I know that you are eligible, and I've looked at the grant application, and I know it's something you guys can be successful at. So keep an eye on that. And then we'll also be posting deadlines for the grants that we promote. So even if you're not as organized as Lindsay, we'll make sure we keep on haranguing and reminding you, because we can do this, guys. We can get these projects funded, and Portland will be the better for it. And hopefully over time it'll get less and less hard to actually generate these funds.
Awesome. Well, let's open it up to Q&A. And while you're thinking of your questions, Mel, would you be able to grab the little box in the crate under the yellow folder? If you have not signed up as a paid member of Music Portland, as an individual member, it's only $25 a year, $3 a month. If you haven't yet signed up, this is the last chance to be eligible for this drawing tonight. So if you're not a paid member,
musicportland.org/join.
There's a code over there, and you can get in there.
Are those for the
You have about
Campfire
5 minutes. Pardon?
Are those for the in-ears from Campfire?
Oh, yes. So Campfire Audio, we need to give them a huge hand. It's a really awesome prize.
I can speak to that. I actually use their in-ears.
You
and they're
do?
really wonderful, yeah.
Do you use the Eras?
No, those are nice though.
They're really nice. So they're retail $1,300. And these are state-of-the-art. There are all kinds of technical jargon that probably somebody like Philip or Malachi would know better than I. But all I can say is they're awesome. And every person who's on our list, tonight we're going to run a I have a randomizer on my computer, and we're going to run a randomizer and draw a name. And that person may or may not be here, but we're going to do that in a second. So, have you thought of a question that you'd like to ask this panel? All right, sir. Would you like to use the microphone?
No, I just,
Okay.
yeah.
Just yell.
My name's David. We were all fun. I guess my question is, we're talking there about asking the right amount. Are the grants like earmarked instead of funding levels, like 5, 10K? Or should I just say, I need 7.5 grand?
So your question is, do grants tell you different funding levels? How do you know what to ask for? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's different. It depends on the grant, and they all tend to be pretty clear. They'll either be ask for as much as you need up to this amount, or maybe they'll say you can either ask for 1,500 or 3,000. Actually, I need to give some credit to RAC. RAC, maybe because Music Portland was annoying, but the Make, Learn, Builds grant program that they did as in response to COVID was much more flexible and I think much more open. And I did an analysis in RAC, Make, Learn, Build round 3, there was 8% musicians that could arguably be in our community that got grants, and in round 4, 5%. So it's still a small percentage, but I think they deserve some credit because I think they really did kind of open up their requirements. Was that? Oh, Echo Fund, it's going to be between 500, don't bother us if you want less than that, and up to 5,000. And there's 50,000 to give out.
That's great.
Oh, we got another question back there.
Oh, I loved it.
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, what we're trying to do is fill the gap that isn't filled over there. And you know, one thing about these grants is we're not judging your musical quality. We are not presuming to say your music is better than your music. This is about project definition. What do you want to do? What are you trying to do? What do you need to do it? And how is this going to help you get it done? Like, we're trying to really make it as straightforward as possible. So we're not, you know, looking at your Spotify, you know, ranking or any of those. We're really trying to have you describe to us. If you went to anybody and said, I need some money to do this, you'd want to do your best job to describe what it is you're trying to do and why you need it. And the good news is that unlike OCT, the people reviewing this grant will understand what popular music involves and will understand that. And I think that'll be a big difference. Who's going to apply?
I have something to say about that. I feel like it's really important. I know that it's really hard for artists, especially like if you want to like call it popular music or whatever, to apply for things like this. But I would like to encourage all of you to apply for Echo Fund and to continue to apply for things from RAC and from any other nonprofit that says they support the arts. The more that we define what arts are through our applications, I think the more people are going to be open-minded to what they need to be funding. And so it's really, really super important that you don't give up if you don't get the first 4. I'm sorry, that sucks, I've been there. Just keep trying, you know, it's definitely not always, it's not always a pleasant no, but it's something that needs to be hammered in, that like art isn't just one thing. And people shouldn't just be able to define that from one group of people. And I also just want to say that Mara and Music Portland, the work that has been put into this, I was very lucky to be in the beginning talks of what this would look like. And I'm so like emotional to see how far it's come, and like really, really proud of this process. And I just like, I just want to say thank you. It's like really touching to have somebody that's actually advocating for this space. And so all of you being here, OG1 Missy, it's like really, it's something. You know, Portland doesn't have a lot of that. So this is like its own really sweet, really wonderful heartbeat of a movement that means a lot.
Thank you.
So any other questions? Let's give a big hand to our panelists tonight. So we have Sarah Clark, Lindsay Clark, Carol McLaughlin. It's super inspirational. It's really inspirational. And by the way, Sarah, you did a whole lot of the good hard work at the very beginning of this, and you didn't say that just now, but she's done tons of work for Music Portland, so thank you.
Hopefully I'll be back doing more once I get my own shit figured out. Thank you, everyone.
We're going to be having coaching sessions. Keep an eye out for those. And we just want people, if you hit somebody ahead of a question, ask us. This is our first time doing it too. And we want to hear from you. Parts that aren't clear, or you feel like we're talking in coded language, we want to get rid of the coding. We want it to speak to you, okay? Oh, Philip.
Do you have reviewers set? Do you want people to be volunteering to review?
Oh, my plant in the audience. Yes. No, definitely. We're going to want, I hope that hundreds of people apply for this. I really want people to get in and jump in and help us evolve it. That's going to require a lot of reviewers, and reviewers can't be the same people. If you're applying, you can't be a reviewer. We want a review panel that is absolutely diverse, that's representative of all genres, of all, demographics, of, different roles in the industry, and that might be music fans that have it, they can look at a project plan, or it might be a producer who does that, and people need to recuse themselves if they know an artist personally. But we're going to need probably 15 panel reviewers. So if you get a note and we're asking for panel reviewers, it pays a stipend, but it's a really, really important part of this process. And we'll be sending out those notices soon.
All right, well, are we ready for a drawing? Everybody signed up? We had 3 new signups in the last 10 minutes. I added you to the list. Okay, so let me tell you how it's going to happen so you understand that it's fair. So every person that is an individual member of Music Portland is in a database, and we've added new names, and they are randomized on my computer. I've exported them, and thanks to Maliki, I know how to do that. And then I found a little program that generates a number between 1 and that number. So what I'm going to do is change the number at the end, and then I'm going to press the button. Wait. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Sorry. This is the story of my life. All right. And the number is the number is 59.
Whoa.
And the person assigned to the number 59 is Tucker. Is the last name Jennifer Joseph Tucker? Is that person here? Yes.
Okay, let's clap for her in abstention.
Yes. Sorry for the long delay there.
That's right. And we have another set of Campfire Audio in-ears that we're going to be doing the same thing for later in the year. So if you didn't win this time, you'll win another time. And we're going to keep on adding different presents. Again, being a member, and I know now everybody here is, being a paid member for $25 a year, you have no idea how valuable it is, because for each paying member, regardless of how much they pay, it represents like 10 people when I'm going out for funding, because it shows that the community is really supporting what we do. If I go and say, I got 12 people paying me, they won't give me any money. So keep telling your friends, it is an investment well made, and the work continues, and we're really excited about what's coming ahead, and we're excited about this grant. And also an update, we're going to be doing Best New Band with Willamette Week. And it's going to be a fundraiser for the Artist Grant Program, so it's going to be at the Wonder Ballroom on July 15th. The ballots, I think, have already gone out from Willie Week, and we made sure that a whole bunch of people in the Music Portland community were getting those ballots, because we wanted like 150 people saying who they think the best new bands are in town. So if you get one, vote.
And I just have to say too, just so it's really important to note that Music Portland is one of the only advocates for musicians in this city. Like, there's a lot of advocacy going on for a lot of different things, but when it comes to musicians specifically and all the things that come from that, whether it's sound engineer or recording engineer or every little like offshoot that comes from being in music, Music Portland supports that. And I think that what you can do, if it's like telling your music friends or doing whatever, just like letting people know that this entity and this organization exists and that they need support, and that by supporting them, you're supporting yourself and supporting your friends. Like, all of that needs to happen. So like, spread the word, even if you're not like, you know, gonna be a Echo Fund reviewer or something. You know, you can still tell all your friends, and that's super. It's really, really important. Word of mouth is how art spreads in the city, and art support spreads the same way. So,
All right.
everybody mingle.
Thank you so much.